This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I have a writer's book club for you, and we will be discussing The Lady with the Little Dog, a story by Anton Chekhov. There is a link to it in the show notes if you haven't read it already. And you can find it for free at narrativemagazine.com. And of course, if you like to read before you listen to the discussion, you probably already know this, but in case you don't, we don't do spoiler alerts. So,
No.
read up.
We expect you to just have read it or be here for the conversation and not worry about
and not worry about it. Yes. Yes. We do usually give enough context for our comments, but
we try.
Yeah. The last one, the woman in the rose-colored dress, pretty much opened with a bang.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it yet,
I jumped right in.
Yes. So, all right. The Lady with the Little Dog. A lot longer, unlike Vario, not 2.5 pages. This one is 16.
16, yep.
Yes. But, it's a Russian. What do you expect? Yeah.
I don't know. There was not a 4-page political treatise in the middle. So I don't know. It wasn't very Russian.
Well, yeah, I think Chekhov likes, I don't know. They also like affairs, don't they? And women.
They do, yeah.
Women stepping out. So,
you know what I find really interesting about Russian literature, and even this one specifically, is I feel like the main male characters are willing and able to be emotional in a different way than other, like, maybe more Western characters are. Like they speak more on their feelings introspectively than I think is more common in male characters in more classic Western literature. It's interesting to me when he starts talking about the way that he has never loved before, and this is the love, and this is the, or the way that she constantly comes to his mind and things like that. It feels a little more emotionally introspective than I'm used to in literature, and I kind of like it. It's a little more vulnerable, I feel like, in a good way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right. I don't know if that occurred to me, though. I was noticing how much power the man has compared to the lady in this society at this time of history, and in marriages and in affairs. And I was quite surprised. He was so dismissive of Anna, the lover, but he was also dismissive of women generally, and even calls them inferior to men at one point. And then there's this turnaround where he goes chasing after Anna and tracks her down at the theater. Like, oh, okay. So that was definitely a surprise.
Yeah. He goes from being, like, his character journey is almost one of indifference and, like you said, looking down upon, women, feeling superior in a lot of different ways, into being the one that can't let it go. And he even talks about, like, he's turning gray and it wasn't fair for him to have done this to her. And it's like, that's the opposite attitude that he started with, where it was almost like he just didn't care. Why not?
Right.
I'm bored. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you said that there was no 4-page political diatribe in the middle of here, but it is very much social commentary.
Yes.
There's this one we know early on that he does not like his wife. He's just in a bad marriage. Where is that line? Let's see. Where did he describe the wife? It was quite...
He had married young while still a second-year student, and now his wife seemed half again his age. She was a tall woman with dark eyebrows, erect, imposing, dignified, and a thinking person, as she called herself. She read a great deal and used the new orthography, calling her husband not Dmitri, but I don't know how that's so different. One of them has an I in it, one of them doesn't.
There it is. Right.
But he secretly considered her none too bright, narrow-minded, graceless, was afraid of her, and disliked being at home. He had begun to be unfaithful to her long ago, was unfaithful often, and probably for that reason almost always spoke ill of women, and when they were discussed in his presence, he would say of them an inferior race.
Right. So now we know how he feels about women and his own wife. And then...
You know what's really funny, though, is of that list, it doesn't really seem like she's that bad. Like, okay, they've had kids, so she seems older than he is now, probably because she's raising a family. And, she's imposing and dignified. She thinks, reads, and, I don't know. It just didn't seem like that was that big of a deal. Like, none of those seemed like reasons to hate her.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, he's juxtaposing her view of herself and Dimitri's view of her.
Yes.
Which is so opposite. And of course, we don't know which one is true. We only have the point of view, character's version of her versus her own through this narrative. But he just, what a jerk.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you get the impression that it's very much a him problem, more so than anything else.
Yeah. And then there's a point, though, after the affair gets serious, where the wife tells him it doesn't suit you to be the fop. I think fop is the word she used.
Yes.
Would you like to be part of a small, dedicated group of novelists? Would you like a consistent feedback loop while you're drafting your novel? Would you like weekly calls with an experienced developmental editor and writing coach? Want to be inspired by a close-knit community of fellow writers? My summer session of group coaching for novelists is now open for registration. Go to www.wordessential.com/fiction coaching. Get all the details about the session, listen to past group coaching writers describe their experience with me, and sign up for your free discovery call today. That's wordessential.com/fiction coaching. Right. So, okay, she knows about the affair, and then Dmitri and Anna figure out a way to be together, but their life is passing them by because they're only meeting in secret. So neither one of them can get out of their marriages. They can't really have each other. They can't really be happy. And, I wonder if Chekhov is wanting his readers to think about love and finding your mate and how many people were kept apart because of social restrictions. Right? Yeah. She doesn't like her husband. He doesn't like his wife. They love each other. And life is passing them by,
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, too, is none of these are romanticized characters. Like, even Anna and Dmitri are not, in any way or shape or form perfect. And they don't seem to think of each other that way either. Like, she seems to be fully recognizing his flaws, and he constantly comments on hers, right? And yet they are in love in a way that when they complain about their spouses, they are not. It's interesting that their love is not fake. Right. They seem to have all of the correct, they've talked about things. They know each other well, right? They aren't just in the honeymoon phase. Right. There's all of these challenges. He looks down on her for certain ways that she acts and her emotions and the way that she feels guilt and all of these things. And she looks he says that she looks at him and he, with so much respect, but you also see her acknowledging his pride and his kind of recklessness a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think there's a lot of social commentary about marriage as an institution in this society, and what that means for people.
Yes.
I mean, she lives in a house with a fence.
Right.
Yeah. And it feels like a prison.
Yeah. Might as well be a doll's house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gibson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Toward the end in the final section is where you realize that they've been doing this for years. His hair is turning gray, and you're like, oh, this isn't just months or 1 year.
No.
When they get together in this final section and she's crying, I was expecting her to tell him that she was pregnant and the baby was not her husband's. I'm like, why else would she be so upset? And then, no, it's because they're meant to be together, but she says she was crying from anxiety, from a sorrowful awareness that their life had turned out so sadly. They only saw each other in secret. They hid from people like thieves. Was their life not broken?
Mm-hmm.
And what a sad turn for them to be so trapped and unhappy because of social restrictions. And that's where Chekhov leaves us.
Yeah.
They had a long discussion, talked about how to rid themselves of the need for hiding, for deception. How, he asked, clutching his head, how? And then the final paragraph. And it seemed that just a little more, and the solution would be found, and then a new, beautiful life would begin. And it was clear to both of them that the end was still far, far off, and that the most complicated and difficult part was just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
How tragic.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's no moral judgment in this story. And I feel like if it was just about an affair and there was like a social anything about the affair, it would be more of a judgment, like, oh, how dare he cheat on his wife? And there is a little bit of that feeling when he talks about like walking his daughter to school and how young Anna is in comparison to his current wife and all of these things. And then it sort of stops. Right? Like, and that's just the beginning of the affair when there's a little bit of like, they're just playing. And why is he doing this? I mean, come on, she's so young. And then it's like, but it's not false. And he's not just playing anymore. And neither is she. And then they can't do anything about it. So the judgment kind of stops being on them and starts being on society. And like, he can't talk to anyone about it. And when he does try, that one official turns around and tells him that the sturgeon was a little off. And I really, to me, that was such a like, no, we don't talk about things like this. Like, we talk about the fish. That's what we talk about.
We talk about the fish. That needs to be like, I'm putting that in a story. That's awesome.
We don't talk about our personal lives though. And he even talks about that all these people are running around with their own personal or private secrets that they are rushing to get to, but none of them can bring them out in the open. They can't have honest relationships with even the people that are close to them because they're all living these, secret lives.
Right.
And that's where it changes from a story about an affair and maybe breaking of a family into a social commentary for me, where it's like, look at all of these lives that could be different, but they can't escape.
Right. And he says, so Dmitri, he had two lives, an apparent one seen and known by all who needed it, filled with conventional truth and conventional deceit, which perfectly resembled the lives of his acquaintances and friends, and another that went on in secret. And by some strange coincidence, perhaps an accidental one, everything that he found important, interesting, necessary, in which he was sincere and did not deceive himself, which constituted the core of his life, occurred in secret from others, while everything that made up his lie, his shell, in which he hid in order to conceal the truth, for instance, his work at the bank, his arguments at the club, his inferior race, his attending official celebrations with his wife, all of this was in full view.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was only 2 sentences, by the way.
We did talk about complicated sentences.
Yes, we did. And, this ties so nicely with the woman in the rose-colored dress and the daughter realizing her father had a secret life. And I think the reason affairs are so devastating, I mean, of course, we could name many reasons, but isn't it the fear that the person who's cheating is the true, sincere, honest self in the affair and not in the life you've built together?
Right. Yeah.
And this is why the daughter recognizes that the mother is being betrayed because the father has this authority of a man whose life exceeds what his family can know about him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
And I feel like this is why they make for such good stories, right? Because it's that uncovering what is real, which one is real. And I think at the beginning, his affair wasn't the real, who he wasn't defined by the affair. And then by the end, it is. And so it's that discovery of himself through this woman that changes what is real and what is true in who he is. And he even talks about that he's become a different person, and I think that's what love does to somebody. You grow,
right.
And which is good, but it's hard to then condemn what, for most people, be like, oh, you've broken your family. You've made a choice that has, hurt people. But also in the same breath, you can say, but he also was hurting in his marriage. So yeah, it's a very complicated thing, which I think is what makes it so good for a story, because it's such a catalyst, right? It forces you to look at yourself, and it forces you to look at the people around you in a different light in order to try to judge what is true and what is good.
Right. Right. Well, and he and Anna both were so dissatisfied in their lives before they met, and that was what drove them each to Yalta separately, where they met. She went there because she was feeling crazy. She had to get out. She had to make a change. Her life in that house with the fence, with that husband, who I think she describes as a lackey.
Yes.
Just doesn't, she's like about to explode. So she tells her husband she's taking a vacation, right? And ends up in Yalta, where she meets Dmitri, and he's already past that point in his marriage. So he takes lots of these vacations and has lots of flings because he's just as trapped in his marriage, but he's not just as trapped because he's a man.
No,
right?
Because he's a man. Yeah.
Yes. But then when Anna changes him, he becomes the way she was in her marriage about her. He says, so when he realizes that he can't stop thinking about Anna, he says, useless matters and conversations about the same thing took for their share the best part of one's time, the best of one's powers, and what was left in the end was some sort of curtailed, wingless life, some sort of nonsense, and it was impossible to get away or flee, as if you were sitting in a madhouse or a prison camp. And it's like, okay, so now that he has an object of desire, a life he wants, which happens to be the life with Anna, that being stuck in the life with the wife that he built but doesn't actually want, his emotion is now equal to what Anna's is in her marriage.
Yeah.
Or at least was before she committed to the affair.
Right. Because prior to that, he could say that he probably had everything that he wanted. Right. He had a good job and he had, riches, and he had the ability to go where he wanted and do what he wanted. And now the only thing that he wants to do is out of his own reach.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And this is, I feel like I would have to read Anna Karenina to really comment, but I feel like there's a connection here between this story and Anna Karenina and the commentary about society and being trapped and not being able to love who you want to love. And of course, Anna Karenina, I believe, throws herself on the train tracks and commits suicide at the end of the book, right? Because she is shunned for
because the options are
loving
so
somebody who is not her husband. Society turns its back on her. And so if, we're left with Dmitri and this Anna trying to figure out how they can possibly be together. And you could say, well, sure, come out, let society know what you're doing here, and guess how that ends, right?
Yeah.
How that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I think there's just so much literature that came out of, this time period in Russian literature that was very focused on society in so many ways. So, there was a lot going on that they wanted to change. And I kind of love that that's so much a part of this. Like, I just do. I think it's so cool using literature to try to change people's minds, to try and awaken them to something that may be happening that they aren't aware of. And to create a social movement, saying this is not okay. This is not right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I both wish there was more now and don't at the same time.
More Russian literature?
No.
Like more.
Feeling like I want that same sort of feeling of literature having that weight of political commentary. And yet at the same time, I so much enjoy my escapism. Both and, right?
Yeah.
I do think it still exists. I do think there's still quite a bit of story that tries to awaken people to the underlying social issues. I think it's just a little harder to see because there's just so much story. There wasn't as much story back then available for people. So
this is true. Yeah. I think it's interesting how little emotion we get on the page in some ways and how much we get in other ways with the story. We have Dmitri and Anna expressing themselves with Anna, it's dialogue, or with Dmitri, it's that reflection, but you never really know why they fall in love with each other. You never really see them in a domestic sense. Like, how are these two a good couple? You just have to take their word for it that they get on in such a way that when they part company seemingly forever,
right,
he can't get over her. Right. So we don't, I think in today's literature, the inclination would be to put everything on the page.
Oh, yeah.
Show me the affair, show me the heartbreak, show me the, tearing the hair out because you can't be together. Like,
yeah. It's not here. No. I mean, this entire story is about an affair that starts on page like 4, right?
Right.
And there's nothing explicit in it. Nothing. And I don't think that's the trend right now, unfortunately.
No.
So then it would become about the romance rather than about their situations. Because really this is about their families and about their situation, not
and
so
society.
Much about their romance.
Yes. Yeah. And it is about their romance, I guess, but it's not a romance.
No.
Right. But it's about
their relationship.
Two people who have a romance, a romantic bond. But, as ill-fated lovers, they're already betrothed, sadly for them. Yeah, so I am going to read the paragraph where they first have sex. My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. But here was all the timorousness and angularity of inexperienced youth, a feeling of awkwardness, and an impression of bewilderment, as if someone had suddenly knocked at the door. Anna Sergeevna, the lady with the little dog, somehow took a special, very serious attitude toward what had happened, as if it were her fall. So it seemed, and that was strange and inopportune. Her features drooped and faded, and her long hair hung down sadly on both sides of her face. She sat pondering in a dejected pose, like the sinful woman in an old painting. That's the sex scene.
Yeah. It's more about the repercussions than about the action, right?
Well, yeah, but it's also the time period and what you would and wouldn't put on the page back then, but readers knew, they were attuned to this, and they understood the exact moment where these things happened. It's like movies post Hollywood Code before everything, before more recent filmmaking where everything goes. And you've got these fade to black moments where a couple is in an amorous embrace, but they're fully clothed. They're standing up on their feet. They're in the living room in front of the fireplace or something, and they're hugging. And that's it. It's an embrace that, nobody's tongue is in anybody's mouth or anything. And there's that scene break. And then they're doing something else. But the audience knows what happened in that scene break. And that's what we have here. And it's a kind of restraint and a kind of subtext that, because we can put anything on the page today, I think we often lose touch with what we can do.
Yes.
When we execute restraint.
Yeah. Because there's some really cool, like that whole night exists on the page here. Not only their first sex scene, but also then they just go down through, they're eating, they talk, and then they go out and watch the sunrise somewhere. And so there's a whole building of, kind of their beginning of their relationship in here that is kind of interesting. He's eating a watermelon and they sit in silence, and then she talks and he doesn't appreciate the fact that she feels guilty. And so instead he's like, why don't we just go somewhere? Right? Let's have a romantic experience. And he even talks at the beginning about how everyone kind of plays up Yalta's, that immoral place, and the mountaintops and this and that and the other thing. And so then he's just like, you know what, we're just gonna go do it. And so he does. So it turns into more than just the action of sex. It's the fact that they had this whole romantic experience the whole night, including the sunrise. So, which I find really cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. And it is so much more than just that sex scene on the page, but Dmitri is still Dmitri.
Yeah.
Like Anna is crying.
Yeah.
Lamenting that she's now a bad woman for deceiving not her husband, but herself because she wants a good life and she just blew it. And she's talking about how crazed she felt before she came to Yalta and how she had to get away. And it says, Dmitri, whose last name I guess is Gurov, was bored. Gurov was bored listening. Gurov was bored listening. He was annoyed by the naive tone, by this repentance, so unexpected and out of place. Had it not been for the tears in her eyes, one might have thought she was joking or playing a role.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
he's
come
still
on,
a jerk.
Dmitri. He is.
Yeah. And then she starts in again, believe me, I beg you, I love an honest, pure life. Sin is vile to me. And he goes, enough.
Yep. He muttered.
Yeah. And then he's just like, come on, let's just go. He kissed her, he spoke softly, and then they went out and went somewhere else. So he breaks the guilt cycle, right, that she's doing. And then they just proceed to continue to have liaisons every day.
Yeah. I guess she got over it.
Yeah, I guess. Well, and the flings that he describes earlier in the story too he's very much it's like they're lighthearted and they're fun and everybody knows what they're getting into. And she really doesn't. And so then he has to deal with that in a different manner. And I think that may have been what, sparked what turned into love, is the fact that he had to care enough about her to help her through it initially. And then he just continues to change. He goes from being that unfeeling jerk to someone who's actually trying to change his life for her and around her. And she doesn't change, like her emotional monologues of dialogue don't change. Like even in the last scene, she's still crying and weeping and telling him that something needs to change. So yeah.
Right. Which I think is why it surprised me that he went after her, after they separate and leave Yalta and time passes, he goes and finds her at home and realizes he can't just knock on the door. So he follows her to the theater. Like, okay, stalker. But given that we don't have the sense of a real arc to their relationship and she is still swearing he doesn't respect her and, crying, weeping her bitter tears, I was quite surprised when he followed her and professed his love. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess.
He's the one that changes. I mean, she doesn't seem to change much, but he definitely is the one that changes over the course of the story. If there's an arc, it's him.
Right. Do you think maybe Chekhov doesn't care about character arcs? I mean, this is a different kind of...
It's a different kind of literature for sure.
So maybe he just has Dmitri do that because he needs them to get together. He's making this social point, right? It's ultimately commentary wrapped up in a story.
I think that his character arc has more to do with love. And I think that's Chekhov's point, is the love aspect, because I feel like both of them married for convenience, right? Like he was school, she was 20 and she just wanted to get out and she wanted a different experience. And that's what they both say, kind of, is like they married because that was the next step. And so it's marriage as an institution, marriage as a contract, marriage as the next step in your life, marriage as how you have social status and how you continue to grow your wealth or your legacy or whatever. And I feel like the way that Gurov or Dmitri changes is because he finds love. He's no longer as flippant. He doesn't see women as inferior. His wealth and his status and his properties don't matter as much as people matter specifically Anna. But I feel like that's the arc that we see throughout, is him being almost more human. You go from being a cog in the wheel of society to being a man who loves a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's all true. And we do see change on the page. Like, he's saying that he's sick of the bank and he's sick of the children and he doesn't want to go anywhere or talk about anything. And he thought about Anna, and she had forgotten himself and was forgotten him and amusing herself with another man. And so on. So we see the obsession evolve,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It just feels more plot driven.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Like, we get into the psychology of the characters and the blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a little less of that for sure. But I don't know. Like, I saw him as being, emotional in a different way, I suppose.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else we want to say about Chekhov and the woman with the little dog?
I wish he'd remembered the dog's name. I'm just kidding.
Oh, I don't think he gave
the dog's name. No,
it was a little
Spitz.
Which is the breed, I guess. And I don't know what that is, but
it's pretty funny. He tries to call it when it's outside with was it the maid or the old woman, and then he forgot its name, and I was like, come on, Chekhov, give us its name. Like, she needs to show up in Moscow with it, and he needs to call it by name to show that he's grown,
that he loves her,
that he loves
so
her
much. I know your dog's name.
I remember your dog's name. Hey, come on.
So this just proves how far back men were using dogs to pick up women.
I know, 100%. That's how he got to know her in the first place. Ridiculous.
It is.
Ridiculous.
Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.